Hello, everyone, and welcome to the number 10 special edition of Midnight Mutterings. I am here with my host, Rapture Remembered.
Hey James, how's it going?
I'm pretty good here in the Houston Chick-Fil-A with my chicken deluxe sandwich. How about you?
Oh man, I just these waffle fries and I don't know, it's just I get such a vibe of patriotism here. All these good older white folks sitting around enjoying their chicken sandwiches. I feel like things are changing in a positive direction.
Oh, yes. Our patronage of this location has ensured Trump's reelection, don't you know?
Well, I mean, if there's one way, if you want to affect the direction of a country, and then of course the people within the country, if you want to affect the culture, you have to start by deciding what fast food restaurants you're going to patronize. Because if you go to a certain fast food restaurant like 3 or 4 times a week, you can't go on Sunday, so you're going to have to plan ahead. But if you do that, if you patronize these places, you will see change. You will see progress.
Yes, because as we know, everything about this system is individual choice. There's there's no systemic issues. It's that everyone makes the wrong choices. So we have to all start by making the right choices.
Well, I mean, you don't have to say you don't like black people. You can just get a chicken sandwich. You can avoid that conversation entirely because there's no point in labeling, giving yourself these negative labels. We can eat our way out of this, as I think you said in a previous stream somewhere. We'll just, we'll vote with our wallets, and then we'll also vote, uh, which is also equally as effective, of course. This is the reality we live in, where these are the methods we're expected to affect change by.
Well, yes, this number one, and just let everyone know, we're kind of taking the piss, and we'll explain today because this special is going to focus on a couple things. Number one, a lot of the problems we perceive with mainstream and even kind of on the edge of mainstream American conservatism. And, we're going to talk a bit about our journeys, but, we were kind of doing a small skit there, commenting on what we perceive many people to believe.
Well, many conservatives, at least, and maybe
Right.
progressives too, because I'll tell you, the progressives seem to think that they need to combat Chick-fil-A as a franchise.
Well, they
Um,
do, but you kind of have to remember, this is just a side observation, but think back to the whole milkshaking thing in the United Kingdom, where McDonald's was closed so that people couldn't or stop selling milkshakes, and Burger King was like, we're open, and then all the lefties were excited about Burger King, even though on a normal day they would tell you Burger King is an evil corporation that tortures
oh yeah,
animals,
and good
and
old base Burger King. I know during Trump's campaign, they were one of the corporations that went to Canada they left the U.S. for
yeah,
various
they bought out
financial.
they bought a huge stake in Tim Hortons or something and moved north, fuckers. Um, but point being that we uh we just see that both sides play this dumb corporate game, but they stay inside that kosher sandwich, right? The left hates corporations, but at the same time is doing everything to appease them. The right loves corporations, but corporations hate them. The conservative, the mainstream American conservative, the people, everyone knows who this is. The guy on Facebook who posts something like, he'll post like a shelf full of bread and he'll say, in capitalism, the bread waits for you. And then there'll be an image of a line and it'll say, in socialism, you wait for the bread. I saw this yesterday on Facebook. I couldn't help but
Oh
laugh. It was
God.
And it's like, no, I'm not advocating and this is the thing, they don't understand what they're advocating.
Yeah, yeah. As soon as you take a contrarian position to their woke take on capitalism or whatever, or unwoke or whatever the freaking terminology is these days, like they assume you're a communist or that
Yes,
you
and that's what
advocate
they
the worst
mean. Like
aspect.
they mean like communism, and I'm not going to defend like diehard socialism. I believe in this Nordic model mixed uh, market economy, which is a strong welfare state with a very free, easy to do business market, right? But these people are like, they perceive people who believe in social programs and stuff as socialists. And they're like, free healthcare will cause bread lines. I'm like, calm down,
Well,
calm
it's like
down.
I was making fun of Ted for I kept on saying that he wanted to like walk over like starving
People
people
dying
on
in
the
the street.
sidewalk, and it's like, and then if you ask them, during this conversation you have with them, if you ask them, well, what if you got fired and you can't afford your rent and your car payments, and I mean, do you just expect your fellow citizens to watch you die on the street? They ideologically, they'd probably be like, "Yeah, well, I guess I messed up. It's time to
Yes,
pay
they
the
would. A
fiddler,"
lot
you
of
know?
them would. A lot of them would be like, "Well, it's not. It's my fault. I'm the one who fucked up.
I'll see you
I
guys
gotta
in the
grab the
next life.
bootstraps."
My bootstraps snapped in half. Yeah, I mean, like by
Straps.
their own, like their logic only applies top down. It doesn't apply bottom up at all, which I find funny. I say top down, I mean like as long as they can afford their $600 a month insurance and Ford uh, F-250 payments or whatever, they like to look down at people. They have more
Right.
than.
Exactly. Exactly. And I should say, and Rapture shares the sentiment that we very much respect anyone who is a hardworking individual who makes their way in society. Rapture and I are both such people. We I'm very proud. I've never lived off any type of system in my life, and I I respect people who are hardworking, and most conservatives are extremely hardworking people who have their own job and have done well for themselves by those bootstraps. But they are so intransigent to the struggle of other people, especially because most conservatives are not college educated, which is fine. I don't think everyone has to be college educated. In fact, the college system right now is a bit of a farce. But people who do get college educated and are pushed into that milieu, we've talked about this on Midnight Mutterings before, I think 2 or 3 episodes back, where the system and your parents and the schools and everyone pushes you to go into college and take out loans. And, they just push you to sign on that dotted line when you don't understand. And everyone is doing that. And it's a systemic issue for younger people. Conservatives don't understand things like that. They think that all of that is individual choice. They think every single person of the tens of millions of people who have been pushed into college debt, basically totally uninformed, they think it is every single one of their individual faults, and all of those people should bite the bullet for it. When in reality, when you have an issue that big, it's systemic. Rapture, go ahead.
Well, it's going to be their own kids too, and I just you have we all seen this person, this guy. He wears uh, jeans that he got at Walmart. He drives around in his Ford pickup or Chevy or whatever, and he raids the freaking artificial sweetener thing at Dunkin' Donuts in the morning. Like he leaves none for anybody else. This guy, he loves to pull the whole pull yourself up by the bootstraps thing against his own children. And so he says, "Well, we raised you right. We invested in you, but then you went and made bad decisions." And the thing is, they are loving people. They do look after their own, and so they continue to take care of their children, but they'll just deride them for the rest of their lives. We've seen this. We see this all the time. And to be honest, my parents are a bit like this, although You know, they're not the classic like you're out of the home at 18 kind of thing. It's like,
Oh, see, my dad was like that.
yeah, I mean, a lot are, and you know, I just my personally, I'm like, oh, if you're going to bring someone into this world, I view that as a lifetime commitment, and a lot of them do. I mean, most of them do, and I'm sure your father does too, but in their own way. Um, so, like I said, they're very caring people, very generous people, but man, do they love giving you shit for things that aren't necessarily your fault,
Yes.
uh, like jobs, like part-time waitress jobs. I'm using this guy's daughter as an example. Uh, waiter, waitress jobs, not being able to pay your entire way through college by working the summer at the diner,
Well,
whatever.
that's even more of a that's even I don't see younger conservatives, and by younger I mean like Xers and early millennials, because late millennials and Zoomers, there are right wing people, but we're all like, marching in the street to Seven Nation Army, not not the traditional conservative you think of. And these traditional conservatives, which I'm going to focus on boomers and some Xers here, um, those people are the people who are like, just get a second job. So, I had an interesting Facebook encounter with a family friend just before my grandmother passed away. Um, and I don't remember what was posted, but we got into a discussion about employment. And mind you, I think I may have told this story before. This gentleman worked oil platforms his whole life, or oil rigs inland. He did both, but he worked as an oil mechanic and did the stuff his whole life. Eventually was making damn near a six-figure salary. Now he's a boomer who has a pension and Social Security. Remember, boomers got both,
Oh
not
yeah,
just.
they're just. I mean, in terms of the systems, they're probably are they the only generation to get that? I mean, maybe the greatest generation got it too. I don't know, but
The silence, the greatest they made. I'm sure some of them did. In fact, I know some of them did because Social Security happened before the boomers. But take my grandma who just passed. She had Social Security and a pension from General Motors. So she was getting two five-figure checks a month, four-figure rather, four-figure checks a month, which is fine. She worked for that. But that's the reality for boomers. Boomers aren't
that's the
poor people.
system. That's the system working. So I mean, it's not that we have a problem with that. We're not saying, oh, we want you to be poor, these boomers to be poor and starving too.
Right? No,
No,
I agree. That's the system working. That is the functional system right there that only the boomers got to enjoy. Uh, and the same thing is happening in my country. The same thing is happening in Sweden. People look at old age pensions, which are dwindling in the social welfare state, and they have no confidence it'll be around. But anyway, my point was boomers. So this guy Larry, I think was his name. We'll just call him Larry, even if it wasn't. Larry worked oil rigs his whole life, and now he has Social Security and a pension from that. He doesn't have government health care, or he might have Medicare now, because of course, the moment a boomer can get on free government health care, they do it. The moment a boomer can get a free program, they do it right
yeah, they're
away.
actually excited about turning 65 or whatever. I don't know if they push the age back, but they're like, all right.
Yes, I knew boomers who would get there. They're like, yes, government health care, Social Security, and oh my God.
But it's actually coming back to bite them a bit because now a lot of the doctors they have to use for those programs are like foreigners, like, and giving them a lower quality care and all this.
Right.
So they're kind
So
of, yeah.
anyway, this guy who worked oil rigs his whole life and who had easy access to jobs, when my grandmother came to the United States, she she was rather young. She had gone from Sweden to the UK and then from the UK to the US. And she had got factory jobs everywhere she went. She could walk. She literally told me one day she walked out of a place called General Cable and she walked into General Motors the same day and got a new job. This was the reality for most boomers. And I was repeating this to Larry and explaining to him, she raised a family on that income. She had, I mean, it's not like she had, loads of cash to throw around, but she was able to afford a house, a car, and to raise 2 sons. That's not bad. There were men who worked in slightly more difficult positions who raised 3 kids, had a wife and 2 vehicles. That's a good middle class life for someone without a high school education. That's the world I support. That's the world these boomers lived in. But
But yeah, if you
that's
ever seen the show like The Wonder Years and stuff like that,
I've
where
heard of it. I've never watched it.
it's, I mean, really any of the sitcoms from the 70s and 80s, it's just this idyllic, like, oh, you got the big house and the cars, and the father comes in, sets his briefcase on the table, and everyone else is like just messing around. That reality has kind of gone away. Um,
Right, but the boomers who lived in that reality will look a young person dead in the, and he did that. I mean, it was through Facebook, but we were having this conversation, and he was admitting, oh yes, I didn't have to get a college degree. Most people I know don't have college. He's going through it, which I commended. He was giving ground for a boomer,
and he
but
probably got to work with a bunch of white people at his
he
job
did,
for
he
most of
did.
his life. It's not like, oh, you want to go into that field. Well, now you're going to be in there with a bunch of people from God knows where who can barely even speak your language, and you probably don't want to be around at
Right.
all.
So then he tells me when we get onto the subject of young people and work, and this is kind of an example of of most conservatives right now, especially in the U.S. His answer was not, we need to get back to that single income, no college needed, middle class job market. His answer wasn't that. He literally said, his answer was go to school, get an education, get a second job, get a third job, do whatever you have to do within the system as it exists now. He would not give ground on changing the system. He would not admit that we need to work the system back into a market like he lived in. Instead, his answer was get a job, or not get a job, get a college education, which is fine, except this is the same kind of guy who tells you your whole life to get a college education. Then when you sign that dotted line for the loan, that you have no idea really what you're signing, because you're just a kid who's doing what you were told. And 10 years later, you have $50,000 in debt. He's the same guy who's going to tell you, oh, well, that's your fault.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of contradictions there. He basically just grew up in a, let's say, a better world, a more functioning world, better
The,
functioning world.
the boomers are a bunch of selfish cunts who don't care about anything that happened after they got their
I mean,
pension.
like if they're working 40, 50, maybe some are even working 60-hour weeks, and they expect you to work like 80-hour weeks for like a fraction of what they earned, like proportionally. It's kind of disingenuous
Oh,
when they say,
don't even get me going on that, because this guy, this was another huge part of that conversation where I was explaining how, like, how if you take the 1970s wages and you take them to today and just adjust for inflation, people are making less money doing the same job he was doing, or the same job my grandma did. And I was explaining that to him. He was like, his answer to this, these factory jobs that used to provide a middle class life that now don't even provide you a middle class life. Maybe if you're a single male, you can afford an apartment and a car. Um, his answer was get a second job. It wasn't fix the system. It wasn't raise wages. It was get a second job, go to school,
well,
incur debt, and then
how
let
was
me
your
make fun of
second
you.
job that you worked for like
I
20
asked him
years? How
that.
was
I asked him that. I said, so in the 38 years you did oil rigs and oil platforms, at what point did you get up in the morning, take the boat to shore, and work at McDonald's for 8 hours? Or was it typical? What was your second job, Larry?
Yeah,
What
get in
did
the boat,
you do?
Larry.
What did you do to make ends meet? And he's like, I didn't need a second job. I'm like, okay, but if someone today is doing the same job you were doing at the time, they are making less money than you did, and they're not getting a pension. Pensions are a thing of the past. And Larry, his only answer was get a second job. And it's because boomers don't give a fuck about people. Boomers have what boomers have, and they do not give a fuck if the rest of society collapses into a poor hellhole because they can still afford to park their RV in Florida.
Well, I would argue they care about their children, but not enough to keep them out of interracial relationships.
The boomers care about, sure, they might care about their individual children, but they don't care about them beyond like the individual, and even this is arguable. They don't care about them beyond the individual, like fulfilling their obligation. Sure, they love their kids, they like to spend holidays with them, but they don't take any traditional obligations. So number one, boomers don't care what happens to wider society. I mean, they have general political opinions, but at the end of the day, boomers usually just say, well, I'll be dead anyway, right? They don't care about wider society.
That's their fallback argument. Is like
It is their
when
fallback argument. When you box them into a corner, they just go, I'll be dead. Which is just proof about how little they care. Boomers don't care about general society. And if we've had this discussion too. Boomers are the first generation to leave nothing to people. They retire, they spend all of their money. I've had boomers say this. They intend to spend every fucking dime by the time they die, and they leave nothing to their children because, well, I earned that money. Sure, you earn that money, but traditionally you leave something to your descendants. That's what a family is. And boomers don't leave anything to anyone. They just
well,
burn it all and die. They
here's the
don't
thing.
care.
Here's the thing is that I think a lot of them would, and I mean I know my parents are trying to, they're trying to, keep something for us, I guess, but just the tightening of the system, the strings, it might prevent that from happening anyway.
I
So,
disagree. I mean, I'm sure there are individual cases, but when I see all of these boomers sell their homes, buy an $80,000 RV, and go live it up like they're 30 in Florida, that's not a system squeeze. That's boomers being selfish.
well, like reverse mortgages and stuff. But I mean, that's only one investment. You assume they only have one investment, maybe they have more. But I'm not trying to defend the boomer here. I'm trying to be realistic in that. Now, if they really do just say, "Hey, we're selling the home, we're going to some trailer that you're never going to inherit or see a piece of, not that you would want to anyway," um, and good luck. We don't have a home anymore. Our homestead's gone. You don't have a place of origin anymore. Good luck.
That's what most of them do.
I guess that kind of is what my family did.
That's what my Polish American grandparents did. They sold their very successful business. Again, two boomers who had no formal education. My grandfather was an electrician, and my grandmother, they owned businesses. They opened businesses. They sold their successful business. Good for them. For a six-figure sum, they bought an extremely expensive RV and they spend all their time in Florida doing extremely expensive things to the point where they admit, yeah, we won't have any money left by the time we die, but it's our money, so who cares?
It's their money. They earned it.
Right, right. And it's not only them. They have a friend named Dave and his wife. They're the same exact way. They have four kids and they're not leaving them shit. They have a friend named Scotty and his wife from Carol, or and his wife Carol from Canada. They have like I think they have three kids, very nice kids. I've met them. They're not leaving their kids shit. They admit it to boomers. This is just how boomers are, and I find it ridiculous. Mostly because it's just another point where they broke down something essential to traditional society.
Well, I mean, you could say that they've been raised on kind of this Hollywood notion that, when you finally do make it to retirement, you just leave. You go to paradise, right? And but the problem is they can't necessarily afford that and the homestead at the same time. So they become rootless, deracinated, and of course their children at that time are likely not living at home. And so there's no place to go back to during the holidays. It's just, let's meet up at a restaurant or something, or you just feel so rootless,
Right,
like
or you end up meeting at one of your siblings' houses who lives 3 hours away, and their house is just, there's no memories in that house. It's not like dad and mom's or grandma and grandpa's house. This shit matters, but it doesn't matter to boomers.
I will say they seem to have an expensive preference for vehicle. They tend to like fancy new pickups and fancy new SUVs, and they're
God,
always like oversized, always. And they also like Mercedes and things like. For some reason, they like Mercedes. Uh,
throw some tow hitches on the front and hook it to the back of the fucking RV.
I
Ugh.
mean, I see these pickups pulling. These things aren't cheap anymore. You think of pickup trucks, oh, it's a cheap vehicle for
Oh,
a guy who's
they're
working some grubby job. Well, these things are
50,
freaking expensive.
$60,000.
Yeah, Chevy's talking about having a pickup that costs over 100,000 coming out. Um, and like these things are all over the place, and most of the time, the people are driving are like these old boomers.
Who go under the speed limit.
Well, I don't know. Either that or sometimes they go way over, as long as they can make you uncomfortable on the road. And so you see these vehicles, you're like, oh, it's got to be some angry young buck who's driving it, and he might blow my head off if I look at him the wrong way. But no, it's usually a boomer. Um,
Usually a boomer. And while we're on the subject of boomers, I'm looking at our notes we have written on our Chick-Fil-A napkins. You have something about a radio host.
oh, geez, yeah. Well, there's this guy. Uh, I don't even know his name. He's just kind of lacking in personality. Not that I'm one to really criticize in that regard, but I was I listen to this guy sometimes because sometimes I want to feel like I'm back in old America. So I'll listen to the radio sometimes. I do a lot of driving, and the station. It's one of the only ones that still plays rock and roll. And anyway, this guy, he thinks he's really cool. He's definitive boomer, and he's not funny at all. And they had just played. I can't remember the name of the song, but it's an NXS song. It was something about the Devils something. I forget, but you guys will know. And he's like, when he finally the song ends and it comes to his little break, he's like, "Speak of the devil, the Democratic debate is on tonight." And so you can tell when I was listening to it, uh, which would have been, I guess, was that last? I think that was last week. Um, but anyway, so he's calling these Democrats devils, and it was just funny because that kind of shows that he has a Republican streak in him, that he's a conservative, but he didn't want to put that's him really rocking the boat to refer to the people, the Democratic candidates as devils. But then that's
Right.
just to this part of the
So he
story is just to identify his political persuasion.
Right. But to clarify, he's not a racist, not a sexist. He's not homophobic. He's just a nasty asshole who don't give a fuck.
Oh yeah, we need to put that meme up. Oh man, this is a great boomer meme that.
I
Uh,
fucking love this meme.
yeah, I mean that guy is just. And we'll have to either link it or put it up in the video. I know we said we would be doing that stuff during our videos, and sometimes we don't. So we'll try to be better about that, James. But
Yeah, yeah.
Zoomer, do your.
Occasionally I forget. It happens.
um, but okay, so this guy, this radio host, another segment. This might have been the next day or something. He has this girl that comes on. She probably sounds younger than she is. She's probably like in her mid 40s or something. And like there's another guy that comes on and they're kind of always flirting with her and making lame ass jokes about society. And oh, let's see, what did he say? He said, oh yeah, they were talking about, okay, the girl, she brings up news topics and the guys give their shithead takes on it or whatever. And what one of the topics was that it's blacklisting corporations. Now, to blacklist a corporation would mean to that you've decided you don't like the way a corporation either practices or their political involvement, where your money goes. If you give money to, like, for example, if you give money to Chick-fil-A, that money's probably not going uh, to bake gay wedding cakes or something, right? So a lot of progressives will blacklist Chick-fil-A, for example, but they're talking more in general, regardless of political persuasion. How many people of various generations blacklist businesses? And they said that went through the numbers, and going from the boomers down to the Zoomers and the millennials and the Zoomers blacklist the most, especially the Zoomers. And uh, and then this freaking coward, he's like, yeah, well, I could probably say some stuff about our own sponsors here. And he's like, what? But I won't, because the guy just completely backed out. Like, he can't, he is too afraid to say anything. He's like, I need that money. And I guess you could say that's comedy, but he's basically just demonstrated that he's not willing to even talk about anything controversial or opinionated, even if he believes in it. Especially if he believes in it, because he's probably politically incorrect, but he has no spine to talk about it. He needs that funding for his show, or so he thinks. And this is just typical conservatism. People won't say anything. They
This this
the most they'll
the
say
spineless.
is they'll grin from their Ford F-150 as they pull into the Chick-fil-A drive-thru. That's the most they'll say about anything.
Yeah, exactly. And conservatives, and we're going to stick with sponsors and corporations. Here in Chick-fil-A is one of the big things. Conservatives are really bad at understanding systemic issue, as observed through the whole college loan debt thing. They're terrible at understanding systemic issues. They think, buying from one company or from one brand is a victory, and they think when one company or one brand, has two gay dads in a commercial, or has, a rainbow-colored soda cup, they think it's that one company making that one choice, and it's this one brand making that one choice. They don't see this whole systemic issue, and conservatives will comment about how society as a whole is gay or faggy or something, but they don't seem to understand that it's not just this deluge of individuals making individual choices. It's a systemic issue placed upon people by a system hell-bent on their destruction.
Well, exactly, and we can talk a little bit about this, because this comes back to the whole concept of, oh, vote with your wallet. That doesn't work. Okay, if you have, like, say, 5 companies providing X service or X product, and the one you're using decides to have an ad with a gay couple, like, frolicking in the kitchen or something, you're like, I'm not going to use them anymore, and you switch to their competitor. Well, the truth is that their competitors probably promoting the same stuff in another way. Maybe they're doing it on the radio, or maybe they're doing it on the internet or something. All these companies basically toe the globo homo line. So you switching who you spend money with from one company to the other. I'm kind of reached this decision with, like, things like restaurants and food. And I'm not saying that, if you know that a certain, like, for example, a co-certified app or something, if you can use that effectively, fine. I'm all for that. But for the most part, I'm not going to worry about whether I go to the McDonald's or Burger King drive-through, because I know they're both anti-white at their core, so it doesn't really matter. Um, it is systemic,
You're
I
right.
think,
It
is
is.
your point.
It is systemic. Very. We have something about get woke, grow, get woke, go broke, which very rarely works. There are a couple instances where, as a movement, especially the alt right, has managed to do something with get woke, go broke. For example, Netflix. Netflix, because they push such incredible levels of global homo bullshit, they are losing subscribers. They're, they lost subscribers. Their stock has taken a hit, and it's still happening, which is good.
Well,
Netflix should die.
well,
I,
that's the other thing I wanted to get to, and is that these companies, sometimes they'll die, but sometimes they don't care if they take major losses. This is one of the things we've talked about a lot in our circles, is that a lot of these, especially these news companies and film companies and music companies, is that they're perfectly prepared to take huge financial losses
to
to
push the
push
agenda.
to push an agenda over the course of generations.
Yes,
Like
I agree.
so you can't vote with your wallet out of this stuff. Like, these people, they're ready to take the hit. A lot of them, and some might not be. If Netflix collapses, great. But I highly suspect that they kind of know what they're doing, and they're just going to force this stuff. They know they have just seas of mindless people just clicking on things and watching, like, absorbing whatever they put out. And I think you'll find them conspicuously well funded, and that
Well, they'll survive.
I think they'll probably survive.
They'll
And if they
survive
don't
off.
survive, someone else will.
They'll survive off debt if they have to. They'll. I mean, this is what news corporations do. CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, all these companies should be dead. They operate at such horrendous margins. They should all be dead. But because they are intricate to the survival of the anti-white agenda and global homo, they are allowed to operate off mountains of debt that generally only sovereign nation states are granted.
Yeah, and they figure, oh, if the system actually comes to collect, then everything's going to collapse, and it's going to collapse anyway. So they, I mean, they're just going to push this right off the cliff.
Well, no
They're
Jew is going to come collect from CNN because of all the Jews who work there.
well, yeah. I mean, they're doing good, fair, and balanced reporting. Someone's got to do it. Uh, yeah, I mean, the thing is, even when you try to starve these companies, uh, you try to starve them financially, they're probably going to stay afloat. I mean, we talk about success we've had with Gillette when they did the whole
Oh,
like
they
what.
took they took some big hits.
So they took some big hits, but they are the number one razor provider in the U.S. I mean, like, I
Well,
don't
I
like that I use their products, but I do because I don't want to cut the shit out of my face. And it's like, what am I going to do? Am I going to they get woke, and then I grow a mountain beard or something? I
Yeah.
it's
You
that's
could use what's the other one? Chick's not bad.
Schick. Yeah, Schick's based.
Based
No,
chick.
they're probably the
Um,
same way. I guarantee. I guarantee we could, like, look them up right now, and they'd probably have, like, trannies running around. Uh,
trannies with razors. Oh God.
it's like,
Come
but
in.
they don't need razors because they don't shave their legs or whatever.
Can you imagine how many trannies they'd give a razor to do a commercial who would just commit suicide? Jesus.
It's like, the trannies, like, slitting their wrist with the razor, and it's like that's the ad or something. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this, but
Perfect tranny razor. Um, God, no, it is. It's ridiculous.
so
Number one,
so that
go
ties
ahead.
into the boomers. The boomers think you can just choose. You can just pick and choose your way, and that all these people who all think right like them, uh, that they're just going to choose the right corporations, and they're basically, they will use their money
The free
to
market.
to affect policy and society, and it's not really happening because things that we need, whether we technically need them or not. I mean, technically, you could live in a cave somewhere, right? But things that you need, uh,
We live in a society, man.
yeah, we live in a society where you need internet and electricity and running water and stuff like that. The boomers go, well, you could just live in a cave if you don't like any of the corporate, if you don't like the energy companies' politics. It's like, you know what? Fuck off. Just fuck off. No, but
Boomers recommend and conservatives in general. This is not just boomers. Conservatives in general, when you have a complaint about society, about the base of society, about the because they don't question the foundation of society. They only question the accoutrements. And when you have a complaint about the very basics of the liberal society we live in, they do that. Their answer is like, it's like this extremist ultimatum that they themselves would never do. Go live in a cave. You know,
or like, well, if you don't like what the internet's putting, what's allowed on the internet, just don't use it.
yeah, exactly. Which you can't not do in the modern world, right? Or if if you don't like Facebook, use a different service. They have these extremist ultimatums to your legitimate complaints about society, but they would never ever do these things themselves, ever. Just like when like they meet someone who has a different social political view than them. They do this to white nationalists when you say, white people, and I want America to be white, and I want my country to be a white country. And there are conservatives who will go, then why don't you move to a white country? Just like they'll tell socialists, why don't you just move to Venezuela? Like
No,
they're
they're starting to realize that like England is no longer a quote unquote white country. I mean, it is to us, but they realize that demographics are bad there. So what they like to say now is move to Iceland. It's like, oh yeah, let's all
right,
just move to Iceland. I'm sure they'll be
right.
very welcoming of millions of Americans.
But again, it's this extremist ultimatum they would never do. If you or I went up to a conservative and we said, "Oh, you don't like America? We'll move to a conservative country." They would get so butthurt because how dare you tell them to leave their own country? This is their country. They love their country. Well, guess what? How dare you tell me to leave the country? I love the country. There are a lot of socialists, and I don't mean left wingers or the stupid liberals of today. There are a lot of traditional leftists who I still have a huge problem with, but there are a lot of traditional leftists and socialists and communists, actual communists, not fucking Antifa, actual communists, who again I ideologically disagree with, but who do love their countries. A lot of communist music, for example, is very patriotic, and I'm not a communist by any stretch of the imagination, nor do I want to live anywhere near or in communism. But the fact remains that a lot of these people still love their country, even if you're ideologically different. And when the conservative tells you, well, just move, if you tell them just move, they might pull a gun on you.
Oh man, it's like, well, what is a conservative country? It's like it seems like conservatism's on the wane most places, except for the places that conservatives disagree with, like Russia and China. I don't know.
Well, I mean, like you could call Poland a conservative country, but even Poland is ethno-nationalist, right? And they'd be like, "Yeah, Poland. Look at how great." I've seen conservatives do this. Look at how great Poland is. They have no illegal. They'll say no illegal immigrants, and they'll have this whole list of how great Poland is, and then you or I would say something like, "Well, it's great because Poland is white." Poland is Polish. And then they'd be like, that's racist.
Well, yeah, I've had kind of problems with Poland and Hungary, and I don't want to fault them or criticize them is if they feel that the only way they're going to survive this is to play the game, then I don't want to fault them for that necessarily. But I mean, just in terms of pure argument, I do find their whole avoidance of race uh, very disingenuous.
The
And
polls, the polls do avoid race. I will. The governing body of Poland does avoid race. Orban doesn't, though. I can send you some stuff. He does not avoid talking about white Christian Europe.
why did he? I mean, maybe he had other reasons, but he locked Spencer up a few years back, which gave the impression that he wasn't all about any kind of white nationalism or anything.
My view on that is, sorry, my view on that is Orban basically got woke. His rhetoric in the last 4 years, 5 years has really changed from talking about like basic bitch conservatism to giving speeches about white Christian Europe and protecting Europe from. He's literally said protecting Europe from brown hordes. So I think Orban got woke, for lack of a better term.
Well, that's great. A lot of us have woken up in recent years. Uh, I think that you and I were probably a couple of years ahead of the fray, but it is kind of nice to know that we're in this larger fray now. That a lot of these people have come into our movements in the last year or two, and a lot of them tend to be younger, which is a good thing because the youth are the future. But about like Hungary and Poland, sometimes they try to play it off as, oh, it's a Christian thing. It's not about race. It's about religion, or it's about being legal, or what are some of the other things? It's about values, or Polish values, Hungarian values. If this is them playing the system and just trying to not bring down the ire of fellow European nations on them, then I can understand that. I might not like it, but I understand it, because the imperative is to keep your people healthy and safe and to make sure they survive. Um, and so that's always going to be number one. Uh, I, I'd prefer if you could do it in a more honest and direct way. And I think hopefully we're headed there. Uh, each country is going to be a bit different. Places like the US are giant
I,
X factors. I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen in my own country. We're one of the only countries that's well armed, there's well armed citizenry. It's hard to tell.
It is hard to predict in the U.S. And I agree on your take about Poland and Hungary, with Poland in particular. Oh, excuse me. Oh, I only got an unsweet tea for my meal. Rapture drinks pop.
I drink cold brew, and
Cold
I,
brew.
I don't know what it's doing to me physiologically or as the years pass by, but it's probably nothing good. But it does wake you up. I will say that.
Yes, we had to
Ugh.
make the Starbucks stop before the
I
Chick-Fil-A stop.
actually, I actually went to your alma mater, McDonald's. Their coffees, even their iced coffee is like
You
half the
just call
price.
McDonald's my alma mater.
Sorry. Um, yeah. Um, and I mean, honestly, you probably received more education there than anything. So it's often these kind of experiences that educate
Oh
me.
God, working. I tell you what, working at McDonald's, I did it for 2 years, man. I would get up in the morning, and I would open the store, and the one I opened at like 5, so I'd have to get there at 4. I'd open the store. I'd work until about 10, sometimes noon, depended on the day, and then I'd go. I'd drive almost an hour to get to college, and I'd be in college until like 7:30 at night because I had some later classes. And then I'd get home, do homework, go to bed, and do the whole rigmarole again. Sometimes I would sleep in and end up closing the store. I did everything when I worked at McDonald's. Oh God, it was crazy. Um, But I am grateful for the experience because some of the best stories I have are from working at McDonald's.
Maybe we should add a segment. Well, we have to pre-plan it, but a segment where you tell a McDonald's story. Um, and if you
You're
run out, or I could mix in some video rental stories or car rental stories and various
like
other jobs I've had.
here's one that really I love. It's boomers. God, boomers. Um, and this is so much. This is kind of like a running thing we did. So at my McDonald's, if you know how sometimes people will get to the drive-through window to get their food, the food won't be ready, and McDonald's will ask you to pull ahead or pull into a parking spot. And if
Yeah.
you'd get one time, we got this angry boomer dude who would not move. He's like, I'm not holding up the line because he thinks if he holds up the line, everyone else is going to blame the staff, not him. So what we did, I love this. What we did was we bagged people's orders and we walked out and we walked around his giant ass $80,000 pickup truck and we gave
Wow.
we shimmied along the wall and gave people their food who were behind him, and then we would tell them, we'd say, yeah, that guy is refusing to move, waiting for food, so how about you give him I would always say, a gesture of appreciation as you drive by.
That
And
guy.
this
You gotta
boomer,
love these guys. These
he
are the
had
these are our own people too.
he
This is
had
what you get when you're in a highly individualistic society where everyone has their own hardcore take on the way things should be.
he had at least 7 people drive by, like they'd pull out of our drive-through and honk and give him the bird. And by like the 7th or 8th one, he begrudgingly moved because he realized we were telling everyone it was his fault.
What was he waiting on, by the way? New
Uh,
fries or?
no, So do you remember when McDonald's did those stupid fucking chicken tenders?
Oh yeah, the
And they,
selects or whatever.
they yes,
See, I'm
yes, and
very cultured person.
they took forever to cook. They took like 5 fucking minutes to cook in the vat, and we were only allowed to keep like 6 at a time. You couldn't have any more than 6 ready to go, and they came in 3, 6, and 10 or something. So if someone ordered 10, they had to wait 5 minutes, and it was so infuriating. I hated them.
Well,
And
they still have chicken tenders, but every time I've tried to order them, they say they don't have them. There's a McDonald's right next to me, so sometimes I'm like, well, those probably are better than chicken nuggets, but whatever.
so we never we never ever had the damn things ready to go. Um, but I digress. You know, so many stories from McDonald's. So
Okay,
many.
my point is, which isn't related to really anything other than real life, is that yeah, getting iced coffee at McDonald's is like half the price of, like, for example, if I get a coffee for my wife and I at Starbucks, it's going to be about like $7 or $8. If I get a coffee for my wife and I and like a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit for her, it costs less than like costs about half of what it does at Starbucks. So I don't know. It just at some point money does matter, and it's kind of nice to know you're saving a little bit. But this has nothing to do with our topics. We're at Chick-Fil-A.
Yes, we are at
Oh,
Chick-Fil-A, and
we
we
were gonna
don't
we
serve beef here.
I don't have our prep work pulled up, but I know we had some things we wanted to get into. Do you have an item listed, or do you want me to
Um,
take it?
no, no, no. I actually I do have it pulled up. And you know we are at a place where young people work, and there are a lot of social dynamics around people my age. I'm 20. People my age, especially in the United States, and working, especially in places
Believe
where
me, that doesn't go away. The social dynamic. I mean, it might change. The perception might change, but they're still there into mid to
right.
late life.
And I'm thinking specifically the for lack of a better word, invasion of particularly middle-aged brown people
into this job market that used to be overwhelmingly young and white. You know, we're going from walking into a McDonald's or a Chick-Fil-A and seeing a 18-year-old blonde something, man or woman, girl or boy, 18-year-old blonde, 16-year-old blonde kid who's working with their friends and excited, maybe not excited, but willing to serve you with a smile, and instead you're being greeted by a 30-something-year-old obese Latina who not only do you not want to interact with, but young white people don't want to work with.
Yeah, and that's actually a better I'd rather work with the 30 something Latina. Believe me, the options get a lot worse. um, and it doesn't get better as you get better jobs, or go into other fields. It's the diversity's everywhere. But I think that I wanted to use youth in this case because social dynamics are so important in and around high school and into early college. When you're a young white person and you're like, oh, I got to work somewhere. I don't want to work somewhere, but I need some money, and I want to work somewhere I feel comfortable, where I like the people, where I can, I like the people I work with. You're not going to want to freaking work at a place where you're shoulder to shoulder with some Congolese dude who may or may not speak English. You don't want to be in that situation. And like so many of these situations are turning out to be like that. And guess what? If the freaking 18-year-old blonde chick doesn't want to work, they'll just hey, they got plenty of eligible applicants to choose from. Like probably some of the 3% of Ecuador that moved here. Was it Ecuador or Honduras? I forget. I mean,
Most
like they will
likely,
just be
I
replaced.
think it's
And they
Honduras.
Honduras, okay. Um, and they will just replace you. I mean, they're perfectly fine with these young blonde kids not working. And then, of course, they don't have the money. They don't build the work ethic. They're boomer parents, or I guess it'd be Xer parents at this point, would will say, "Oh, the young generation is so lazy that they don't want to do anything." Well, no, they've had their work environments taken away from them. If not metaphorically, literally, they've
Literally,
lost the jobs.
again, if when brown people enter a workspace, at least the majority of how brown people are, when they enter a workspace, especially something like that, fast food, not skilled labor, and they're lazy, they know they can get away with not doing their job correctly because if a white manager tries to fire them, they're just going to scream racism, right? So they're lazy. They don't do their job correctly. They're generally not very friendly, especially if there are a lot of them. You get multiple black people, you get multiple Hispanics. They create their in group, which is fine. Create your in group. I want my in group, but they're still not friendly to other people. Like I can have white people, if we have an in group, and we do in friend groups and stuff generally, we're still friendly to other people. They're not. So now you have lazy coworkers who aren't friendly, who probably struggle to speak English, and even if they do speak English fine, they're going to speak Spanish to their whoever else fucking works there. The entire situation just becomes something where young white people are wholesale uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's very easy to push us out. It's just like the thing with white flight in terms of, oh, I want to live in a white. If you want to live in a white community, it better be a majority white, like a vast majority white community. And those are getting harder and harder to find, especially as you have people of color moving into them. Um, and yeah, it's the same principle. It's like a lot of these workplaces are pushing white people out, and I think the same applies to adult positions, although adults will kind of just, when you're an adult working in, say, a medical field or something, or academic field, you kind of like, okay, well, I don't need to be buddy buddy with this person. I just do a job, and if they aren't professional, since it's a higher, tier job, that you'll find some reason to get rid of them. But at the
Right.
same time, you still, as an adult, you want to work around your own people. You don't want to be the only white guy working with a bunch of Central Americans and Congolese and whoever, God knows whoever else. That's
And,
not a nice place to work. It's not a good environment.
and here's the thing, right? They've done the research, and one of the reasons, people make fun of white flight, like, well, why would you move? Why don't you hold the area? They've done research, and white people care about things like how a neighborhood looks, how nice the neighborhood is, the cut grass, the manicured lawns, the nice roads, clean houses. We care about that. White people get stressed out, literally, psychologically, physiologically. Our bodies react negatively, mentally and physically, to things that aren't presentable, to things that aren't decent, to society that's not well put together. Brown people, especially blacks, do not react that way. They have done the research. Black people do not care about a messy home and a shitty lawn. They just don't. They don't care if they do a bad job at work. They don't care if they make your chicken sandwich on a counter that hasn't been cleaned in 4 hours. They just don't give a shit.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially if you ever get to actually see them, like if you're at like a Subway or something where you can actually see them, like if it's a white person, like they'll generally be pretty clean, but if it's a black person at like a Chipotle or a Subway, like they're just so sloppy with what they do and they just don't care.
I hate when I walk into a, and this used to only happen in the U.S., but now we have them. We have blacks in Sweden. When you walk into a restaurant or any kind of business where you're going to get served, and you're waiting and you see multiple employees, and you're like, oh, there's a white guy, oh, and a white chick, and then there's the black, and especially for me, I just know whenever I walk into a business and I'm waiting to be served, it will be the black who serves me. It just will.
Yeah,
Every
what's that principle called? It's some kind of principle where everything goes wrong or something.
You are right. There is a name for it. I don't remember, but I just know I'll get the nigger.
Murphy's Law.
I'm gonna have to edit that part out, David.
Murphy's Law. Ah,
Murphy's.
why?
I just know I'm gonna get the black, and it happens every time. Last time I went into a Subway, I like Subway, a particular type of sandwich. But anyway, I went into a Subway, and there was a Somali-looking dude, and I'm like, oh no, because it's really funny in Sweden. When you come visit, I'll show you. This is great, Rapture. In Sweden, we have mostly like Somalis and Eritreans and
Yeah,
stuff.
but you need them there to make those sandwiches
And they,
because,
right,
yeah,
right.
I mean,
They have
Swedes just,
they have a very distinct look about them. You can tell what a Somalian, an Eritrean, and Ethiopian. You can just tell. You just know
they
the
look
way
like
they're colored.
extraterrestrials, right?
Yeah, kinda. And, and I walk in, I'm like, oh, great, a Somali. But then there was this pretty white girl, and then I'm like, oh my God, you have to work with him. I feel bad for
Yeah,
you.
just imagine the harassment. I mean, they could rape her any day after work when they're closing up or something. I mean, like,
No
you
kidding.
just don't
So,
know. It's
so
not a
then
good environment.
I'm like waiting to to have my sandwich made. And my first thought upon walking up to the counter is, I'm gonna get the black. I'm gonna get the black, and I got the black. And my second thought is, there is no way in hell he speaks Swedish. None. And he didn't. He didn't. I ordered my sandwich in my own country in English. And I have a
At least
very
it's better than like I'm to the point where you almost have to like point and grunt like like this. That's gonna be like communication in the future.
your Google lettuce and show him the picture. Point and grunt. I like that. Oh my God, that's funny.
Yeah, you have to like bring a little picture book with you to point at things and stuff.
And of course, I sound very American when I speak English because I lived there for so long. But nej, jag pratar svenska. Jag pratar svenska flytande. So I'm like, there's no way he speaks Swedish, and he didn't. And I got my sandwich, and he just slopped it together. And I'm
Well,
standing.
they never clean the knife. They always have like everything that's been made the entire day sitting on that knife and on the cutting table.
Oh, So my sandwich gets slopped together, and I took it home and ended up like taking it apart and putting it back together myself. Um, but it was just a small example of how terrible things are getting. I remember 3 years ago when I was going to just visit Sweden, and I was in the airport, and I walked up because I was going to take the bullet train line into Stockholm because I hadn't done that before. And I tried to ask a gentleman how to get there. And he kind of stared at me and he muttered something in Swedish that I didn't understand. And I said, yeah, excuse me, can you point me to the thing? And he goes, no, speak, no speak. And I said, okay, do you speak English? He goes, no speak, no speak. So this guy who hired by the government, mind you, to work in an airport did not speak English or Swedish.
You're just gonna have to learn Swahili. I mean,
Point and grunt.
try to
This is a great example. I ended up pointing and grunting.
you try to like imitate a train and like run around in them
No,
circles or something.
there was like a big map under a bladder on the counter, and I was like pointing and grunting at the train. I'm like, this.
God, well, I tell you,
And then he pointed down a long hallway, and he's like, there. I'm like, oh fuck.
then you end up in the
It
welfare
was the
office
wrong
or
way.
something.
No, it was the wrong fucking way. I ended up walking up to a currency exchange because I saw like a boomer blonde woman. I'm like, oh my god, a Swede! And I walked over there, and I'm like, I need to find the bullet train. And she was of more use than he ever could have been.
But I will say that, like here in Florida, I'm pretty black-pilled in terms of this kind of stuff, these kind of encounters. But every once in a while, I'll get the opposite, and it feels when you've been exposed to this level of diversity for so long, and then you have a flashback all of a sudden to the way things used to be. It feels magical. Like one time I was driving around in the countryside because apparently this was for some disability stuff for one of my family members. For some reason, one of the drugstores there had they carried special medical supplies, and I needed to find this particular one. It was like a CVS, and I went into this gas station like, man, I'm not looking forward to asking these people about, where this particular drugstore is. But all the people were white, and I asked, and all the people in line just stopped what they were doing and chipped in with their own advice. And they're like, "Oh well, I hope you find the medical supplies you're looking for." And like one guy, country guy followed me out into the parking lot. It's like, I think it might be over. It was magical. Like I hadn't interacted with my own people. I almost want to cry thinking about it. Like the just the good natured interactions. Like it's like they were just waiting for some kind of social interaction with their own people. Like we've just been deprived of this for so long.
So
And
I'm used to, or was used to, I don't get it so much anymore. I grew up, number one, where I was born in Sweden, which is a city called Gävleborg. It was totally white in 1999. There weren't foreigners. I mean, Finnish people, but Finnish people are white, even though we joke they're not. Finnish people, but it was a totally white city in a country that was still like totally freaking white. And then I moved, and then when my parents moved us to the U.S., um, I grew up in a town of about 4,800 people, entirely white. I was 100% used to everyone I interacted with being white. And I remember when I entered, except for going down to Detroit, but you just kind of understood like Detroit's a black area. Even
it's like enemy territory. Be careful. Be on guard.
well, now I perceive it that way, but as a child, it was just like, okay, that's a black area. This is just where black people live. Black people live in Detroit, and and in
They've
my
always lived there.
yeah, totally. And in my childlike mind, you just think black people live here, but then the rest of the world I had been exposed to And I just assumed, right, your young mind builds this abstract vision of the rest of the world where you just assume, oh, it's the rest of it's just white, like where I live, because everyone I interact with on a daily basis is white. I never see brown people. And I remember going into early college and driving back and forth regularly and stopping at gas stations and stuff and just being exposed, like walking into a gas station and not seeing white people anywhere, as opposed to like how you're excited when that happens. You're excited when you see white people in a gas station. I was so used to it that when it didn't happen, I was flabbergasted. And this was as a leftist. I realized like there aren't white people anywhere. And it wasn't like I longed for white people as a leftist. I think unconsciously I probably did. But it was my mind noticed it. It's like there aren't white people here. What the hell? And
You notice things that like you feel like you're on guard more subconsciously, and you also think like everything's kind of a little bit dirtier and more disorderly.
yes, yes, this gas station is kind of dirty. There was one on the way where like they had all of these shelves, but I'd say a good 35% of the shelving was just empty and not dusted. And it like you just kind of look at it, you're like, this place is different. It's different. And then of course when I got woke, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it, because it's brown people. Um, I got, halfway through being 15 and in early college, I really I got red pilled quick. I never went through, and this kind of ties into the conservatism theme. I never went from like lefty to Ben Shapiro to libertarian to alt right. I went right from being a pretty staunch leftist to alt right. I mean, I just jumped.
I basically did too because basically the bridges between like I wasn't going to stop at conservatism, right? I mean, because that I mean, the whole Bush thing, we were against him anyway. Uh, and so who did you find as the intermediaries? You'd find people like crackpots like Alex Jones and people like that, and just like yeah, this guy's kind of
Yeah,
kind of
I
out
was
there,
held by Alex Jones.
and so you like I had to keep searching. I wasn't going to stop there. Uh, and I started to I found the conspiracy movement, and then eventually well, should we talk about our wake up processes, or think we have time for that, or
Yeah, I think we do. Do you want to take the reins and go first, or would you prefer I do?
yeah, I'll go first because I kind of got started on it. Oh, geez. So I was seriously asking myself, when did I get woke racially? And I had thought about this before, and actually I had come up with a timeline of my process because I was a leftist, a progressive of sorts, although I didn't have any kind of idea what I was progressing toward. We're talking about back during the Iraq War, Second Iraq War uh, days, the Bush era, where it was easy to hate Bush and the neocon hawks, and I still do, and it was easy to paint them as the villains from like the Muppets or something because that was practically a puppet of them. Those were practically puppets of them. The guys on the balcony who looked down at everyone. Um, and so you got sucked into Obama pretty easy because he was the exact opposite of this, seemingly. And, so we were all excited about voting for Obama, getting the first black president. I remember I may have been in tears on election night in 2008 when, he was given the speech at, I think it's Hyde Park in Chicago. And I was at college at the time, and there were a lot of these stories that would pop up in classes by lecturers. Like I remember I had this one black lecturer for something. He was black, but he was one of those brainy, barely black types, you know. And he was saying how he was working out at the gym, and he heard these two white guys talking about how Obama got elected and how they were like in tears over it or something. And he's saying how he's like, oh, he didn't know how to react to it. He was kind of shocked that these white people were reacting in such a way to a black man rising to the most powerful office in the world. And so there was that reality. But then soon enough, it kind of just devolved into, basic political mumbo jumbo. And I think the first thing that struck me as just wrong was when Joe Biden, good old Joe, bleeding-eyed Joe, like went over Obama's head and he effectively forced through gay marriage. He was the one. Like you could say it was someone else. You could say it was this person. It's basically him. He's the one who strong-armed it through, and he put Obama and in effect Hillary, because she was basically under Obama at that point. Um, he put them in the hot seat, and they had to change their positions. And so all of a sudden, what, like, slow down. Uh, all of a sudden, gay marriage is all kosher, and things got worse from there. Now, uh, fast forwarding a little bit, I was noticing I lived in some pretty diverse areas, which I hadn't been accustomed to before. And I started noticing a lot of Muslims. I started noticing how black people were kind of gen- generally shitty toward me, and like constantly looking to take advantage of me, or to just give you a hard time wherever you went. And uh, these kind of things were playing in the back of my mind. And then I started to read a book called Countdown. Now, this is Countdown by he's by a Jew, but he does a pretty good job talking about overpopulation and the problems of our our expanding populations. And this his opening chapter was on the womb warring between, meaning the fertility battle between the Hasidic Jews in Israel and the Palestinians. And this whole concept is what woke me up, I think, because I was really kind of into. I'd moved to Florida. I was really into kind of the environment at that point. I was into the animals and the beautiful beaches and various. They're not even forests; they're like marshes. But I was kind of really into that stuff at that point, and I was really concerned with the overpopulation because there's just cars everywhere, and it was so hard to get away from people. And so when I read that all these people are trying to outbreed each other along racial lines, it really kind of forced me to wake up. And like I said, right around that time was when a lot of these attacks happened, Charlie Hebdo, and then eventually the Paris shootings. And around that time, and then the whole Merkel migrant crisis, and that was my breaking point. And I
Well, so
wrote to.
you've been woke for a shorter time than I have. I didn't realize that.
Perhaps. And I'll just finish this real quick because I know I've been kind of long-winded about it, but um, I wasn't going to stop at Alex Jones. Alex Jones was not telling me what I wanted to hear and what I felt was a genuine explanation for the differences between, say, white Americans and Muslims who are appearing more and more frequently in my daily life. And he just wasn't. He was playing that egalitarian thing. He wasn't going to be the racist. And I saw the people on CNN. Just one of the main things was like Bill Maher had Sam Harris and Ben Affleck on, and they had a conversation, and that really forced some things. Uh, and it just became clear that the whole progressive perspective on the other was bullshit, and that you had to draw a line. And if you're drawing lines, then eventually, if you come to that realization, then you're going to understand that it is about identity. And that's when I found Millennial Woes. I think at that time I also found Styx, Hex, and Hammer and Paul Joseph Watson, who was a little better than Alex Jones, which isn't saying much. But and Styx Hexenhammer wasn't. He's not a race realist, but he had some interesting commentary on global politics. But it was Millennial Woes who was speaking the truth in a way I had never really heard before. And I'm sure there were others at the time, like Richard Spencer and Jared Taylor, doing it, but I didn't stumble upon them. Somehow I stumbled upon this guy who had like, I don't know if he had 2,000 subs at the time or something, but it was something like that. And so it was nice to be a part of that kind of an earlier part of that community, although I still feel like I wasn't there in the beginning. And obviously the red pills just started to rain at that point, talking to people in and around that community. So yeah, that was my wake up process. Hopefully it wasn't too long winded for you guys. I don't know
No,
if
I
James is
actually
making a sandwich. Okay.
no. I found that very interesting. It is a bit long. Mine's kind of a long journey too, and I would say so. Before I was alt right, I was a leftist, but I wasn't a woke leftist, and like I didn't hate white people. I didn't think like white people are evil and the root of all problems. I never really bought into that, and I think it's because I was a militant atheist. So I really was like, religion is the root of all problems, and there's no difference between any of us, and everything that's wrong with the world is caused by, religious dogma. That was my thing. And then at 13, I took a trip to the UK. I went through Wales, and Wales was glorious. And of course, now I look back on it, Wales was white. It was Welsh. Every part of Wales was wonderful. And then I went to saw a town in northern England, and it was just gorgeous and had this ancient medieval wall, and it was white. And I'm like, wow, this is great. And then I went to London, and at the time,
Oh God, London.
right, and at the time, my 13-year-old nominally lefty, very atheist brain didn't didn't figure out why, but I felt like this isn't England. This is kind of its own thing, and it's different, and I don't like it. And I couldn't point out why. Couldn't figure it out. I remember my first exposure to Global Homo was on that trip. I was standing in line to get some fish and chips, and I see coming around this corner. It was this grotesquely rotund. We're talking 380 to 400-pound, grotesquely rotund person in a dress with a beard of like it was a shoddy, spotty beard of long curly hair standing on end.
Sounds disgusting. What year was this again, approximately?
I was 13, so we're probably talking 2014.
Wow, I can't believe you're that young. It still boggles my mind how young you are sometimes. But go
Maybe
ahead.
it was 20. Maybe it was 2013, but not. No, it'd be 2014. It's 2019. I'm 20 years old. Anyway, yeah, it was. So it'd be 2014, summer 2014. I'm looking at this grotesquely rotund tranny. I think at the time I didn't really realize, but I literally just had a breakdown. I just started to laugh. I didn't know what else to do. I was having such a hard time processing what I was staring at that I just started to laugh, and I was laughing so hard I fell against the wall of the building I was waiting against, and and this tranny thing knew it, and I and one of the leaders of this trip of students was trying to get me to stop, and I was laughing so hard and so vigorous, and he was a Hispanic, laughing so hard and so vigorously, he started to laugh at it too, and that was like but anyway, I pinpoint that moment as the first break in the dam.
Breaking it down. Well, I mean, like to what? I mean, to what end? It's like I could understand being really confused trying to process this thing. But,
And so then, I went back to the
you're
U.S. and
you're like the break is that this is not right. What's
yes,
happening here
exactly.
is not right. Okay.
It was this moment of like, what the fuck? Because again, I was a leftist, um, but in a totally white area with nuclear families where most people go to church on Sunday and all these things. So yes, I was a leftist and I knew other leftists in my white area. So I figured, hey, like this is just society, right? We live in a society. This society ain't half bad. Sure, people are conservatives and conservatives are backwards and evil, but society ain't that bad. Um, so I ended up going back to the US and a year went by and I was still like, watching Richard Dawkins every day and reading his books. Sam or Christopher Hitchens, and I was very well read for a 13-year-old. I read a lot. Um, and I remember the next really hard break in the dam is when I got into early college at 14 in a program funded by the state of Michigan, and the program they took in both gifted students. I don't want to toot my own horn, but they took in very gifted students who were well ahead of their time in high school, which is a category I fell into. And then they took in basically failing brown students who they thought the environment would be better for. So it was a mixture of extremely gifted kids and kids who they thought needed a different environment.
What an
And it was
antipodal
yes,
classroom.
yes. So I remember I remember this like it just happened. The very first day we were getting introduced to like the counselors in the program who helped us through the college classes and all this stuff. And we're sitting there, and one of the counselors, I'll just use her first name, Christy, was talking. And Christy is going on and on. And she hands us all out a packet to fill out. And this, again, with these grossly rotund people, this incredibly rotund black girl named Ladasha. Um, we ended up calling her Mary Poppins, and I'll explain why in a minute.
Beautiful name, Ladasha.
Ladasha. Ladasha stands up, holds her packet in the air, and declares, Miss Christie, this here a bunch of bullshit. And I was flabbergasted. Like my well-behaved, polite, well-spoken, I don't speak well on the podcast, but you've heard my general speech. I try to be very well-spoken and proper. So
You
I'm
are.
like,
I hope I'm not bringing you guys down
no.
by Xer.
I was entirely blown away by this. Like the disrespect, the the gall of it, something I had never seen because you respect your teachers. And I'm like, why would she do this? And I could never figure it out. But over time, I noticed that, and I couldn't because I'm very scientifically inclined. And one of the reasons I never got woke, like, full on hate white people, is because I believe very strongly in science. So my leftism was based off of information I felt proved my political points. And I eventually, had to concede to myself that all the black people are behaving this way. Why are all the black people behaving this way? And I started to buy books and I started to read on racial dynamics. And at first it started with leftist books and it like slowly moved it. But it really wasn't changing my political position much, so much as kind of just explaining the world to me. Um, and then one day, and I don't remember the circumstances through which I stumbled across Red Ice Radio. And I watched a couple of their
I was wondering where the where the rub would come. So it's red
Right.
ice, huh?
Red Ice, yes, Red Ice, and I credit them, and you know I know Henrik, and I've told him before. I'm like, dude, it was you. Um, Stumbled across Red Ice, and I started to operate in a dichotomy of I was a race realist, but I was also like an ideological leftist and atheist. I was doing both for a long time, and it was hard. Like morally, it was quite difficult because I'd be a race realist who was pro-gay. I have no problem with gay people. You know, I was one of those people. Um, I didn't even have a problem really with trannies. Uh, I was just pro-white, and then of course I was an atheist. So then I became really anti-Muslim. But I was anti-Muslim, number one for race realism, but also like the Muslims hate the gays. Muslims throw gay people off roofs. That's terrible. We don't kill gay people. Like I was one of those people.
That's like the
Um,
worst argument against like Islam taking over.
it is. It is. They throw gay
It's like,
people
well,
off
can
roofs. We
they
don't.
come here for a little bit and do that and then go back?
Right.
Or
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm just
Um,
joking.
I'm not. Um. So I was one of those people, and
Neither am
then
I.
neither am I. And then actually, this is kind of funny. I watched after Charlie Hebdo. Red Ice did a stream with Millennial Woes. And I watched that over the course of a month. I watched it like 6 or 7 times because I liked everything Colin Millennial Woes said. But I didn't want to like devolve into going and searching up his content. I was kind of trying to be comfortable in my weird diametric milieu. But eventually I broke and I like binged Millennial Woes, and that was basically it. That was my red pilling. Um,
You know, it really is amazing. He doesn't like when people praise him, and you know, he's kind of one of these guys that are kind of he's quirky about what people say about him and all sorts of stuff. But and despite his small following, he has a small following partially because he's censored on a lot of platforms. But like for having such a small following, he's quite impactful. I've always found that rather impressive. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to interject that.
no, I agree. Colin is a very impressive content creator, and he's actually put out some new videos on YouTube, so I recommend people go watch them. Um, and that was basically the red pilling. I was never a libertarian. In fact, as a leftist, I made fun of libertarians because they're funny. And then even now, I make fun of libertarians. Like most people go through libertarian phase. I never did. I have always kind of hated libertarianism. I find it to be a joke. I call them lawbertarians and lawberts and stuff. So I totally skipped over that bullshit, and I'm happy I did because I
It'd be
feel like
hard. It'd be hard to land in that and stay for. I don't see how. I could see how people did it during the Bush era, where they're like, I'm just a special. I'm more special than the mainstream Republicans. But now I don't see how people stick and land in that unless they have ulterior reasons for it.
a lot of people who are like searching for the truth, I don't think end up staying in libertarianism. I mean, that's a lot of the alt-right is former libertarians. They don't stay. Um, Landing in it is common though, and I have yet. I don't know why. I think it's because people first want to blame society, and society is looked over by the state, so they blame the state, and then you have that whole like the state is evil and capitalism is
Well,
great.
okay, well, that's a good point. So it's like if they land there, it's like they're they're trying to be really analytic, but they're also trying to avoid a certain type of argument. They want to avoid race realism. Obviously, it's the main argument they're trying to avoid, but there are
Oh yeah,
other things they try to avoid too. So this is them constantly trying to. It's the ultimate dance around. They're trying to find anything else, anything that's not racist, that's not
they're
sexist,
like
etc.
libertarians are like the conservatives in that they don't want to, or they're unable to recognize systemic issues around anti-whiteness and white genocide. They're looking for any other excuse, any other explanation. They want to search far and wide to the ends of the earth before they eventually sit down and open that Jared Taylor video. But you end up here, you get here. It's the reality of it.
Well, the people that stay in libertarianism, I mean, a lot of times they're like mixed race or of other races, and so they they might be there for reasons that they don't even acknowledge to themselves, or maybe they do acknowledge that they don't like white identity because it doesn't mesh with who they are. Although I'd argue in a lot of cases it could. But
Well, the fact is,
yeah,
the only people who could maintain anything like a libertarian society would be white people. And
in these
libertarians know this, even if they don't admit it.
these libertarians, I mean, I suppose if you wanted to write a science fiction novel about the future, like a utopian society, I suppose there could be a utopian libertarian society in the future. But it's not going to work out too well if there's people of different races. Eventually, it's not like there's going to be this perfect harmony of, oh, there's a black people here and white people here and eventually there's going to be these conflicts. I like differences create conflict or utter
Well, even
blender theory, which is genocide. If they just want everyone to blend, that's genocide. So
libertarians have the best chance of libertarianism in its purest form of no government, NAP, yada yada yada, ever working is with white people. But even with white people, it won't work. We're still people. We're not perfect, and people will make choices with their private property that will endanger everyone else.
it could work in a very Orwellian sense, in that if people don't cut it, they just die in the street. You have these scoop machines that come by, like in Soylent Green, to sweep up the corpses. You could have a libertarian society like that, where only the strong survive. I don't think it would be a very pleasant reality.
But if the machine comes by and sweeps your private street, and you didn't say it could sweep your private street, it's violated the NAP, and now you get to blow it up.
Oh yeah, and then who's paying for that machine too?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Exactly.
So ridiculous.
If you want,
you have to have your own corpse sweeping machine. There you go.
Well, if you wake up in the morning and there are 2 dead bodies in your driveway because 2 people happen to starve to death right there in this libertarian society, and you need these bodies picked up, you have to call the private street sweeping company, who's going to charge you, $30,000. So you have no choice. You just have to bury them yourself. People are gonna call this a straw man and a weak argument, but really, it's just, I don't think libertarians reflect upon the kind of society they want. Like, so, for example, we have a mutual libertarian friend, and she said this to me a bit ago. Like, she thinks of government, or the services government provides, as you need multiple choices. So her big problem with the current government, or government in general, is that it forces you to pay taxes. You don't consent to it. It violates the NAP.
Well, yeah, I don't like that either. But I mean, the truth is, if there weren't all these institutions that protected me and my family, we'd probably have been attacked and killed by now or something.
So no, I like government. Maybe it's because I'm Swedish, but I like government. Government by my own people, for my own people, which used to exist here. It was pretty fucking good. It worked pretty damn well, and that's what I want. But anyway, this friend of ours, imagines like multiple choices in government, and you pick the one you want to pay for. And like the entire thing is just ridiculous.
Well, I'm sure Somalians and Congolese and they're going to really slow down, put a halt on what they're doing to analyze all these choices and weigh it carefully. They're not just going to continue doing what they've been doing for millennia. They're going to stop to adhere to these libertarian ideals.
Yes, yeah. Well, there are a lot of racist libertarians who know that it'll only work with white people, but there are libertarians who aren't. I mean, that libertarian conference down in Mexico that Lauren Southern spoke at, where she did really good, debating that one gentleman who was, he was like, the military is a violation of the NAP, enforcing borders is a violation of the NAP, we should all be able to live wherever we want. But she got him really good because, you know, he was anti-Islam and anti-Muslim, basically, because they freaking kill people. And she goes, but if we don't have a border defended by men with guns in your world, those Muslims can just come here. And then he made the comment like, yeah, but I have my private property. And it's like,
It's
Muslims
the
don't care.
atomization. You have to.
Muslims don't care about your fucking private property. If they want to come on your private property, rape your daughter, and chop your head off, they're gonna do it. The sign that says "keep off private property" is not gonna stop them.
Well, I mean, we've all seen videos of what happens to even like healthy white men or men of a different race when they're surrounded by, like, say, 5 Muslims or 5 blacks. It just, the one behind them will run up and hit them in the back of the head, and it just, it's like dominoes from that point on. It's like individualism is toxic to a certain extent.
Individualism is killing us.
Like, you can't compete against that. Like, you need a group to be a part of for defense. And I mean, either that or just don't put yourself in a bad situation, keep on the move, or I don't know. There's so many holes to libertarianism. I feel like I kind of sidetracked your evolution story, but we have been talking for a while, so.
I was pretty much done, and then, I think we've had a quality time here in Chick-Fil-A, and we should call it an episode until everyone joins.
I'm gonna raid the ketchup packets and load a bunch into my satchel before we leave here, and because they're free,
Boomer move.
And I just wanted to say before we leave, it seems really horrible what's happening to Red Ice. I guess they got their channel shut down. I don't know if it's come back at all.
I don't think it's back, but yeah, they did get banned.
And they've been really instrumental. They've kind of done something different where they have this very welcoming platform to people with different views. I mean, there's been all sorts of people on their show. I say different views within a far right kind of circle, but they've definitely given a cozy welcome to a lot of different people, brought a lot of people together, and they're so well presenting. Henrik and Lana, they're just, you can tell they're good people, even if I've never met them, I can just tell they're great people, and I wish them the best, and I hope their brand can continue after this ridiculous purge by YouTube.
I'm sure they'll survive. They have their website with their members, and I would encourage people to go become a member at redice.tv. It's very well worth it. The content is great, and you support one of our biggest pro-white media organizations.
Yeah, I might definitely have to do that, actually. I never actually looked into, strangely enough, I've never actually looked into their own site. I know that before they had, done the thing where they have some content for free. So,
I've been a member for 3 years now. I pay my subscription yearly.
Awesome.
Very well worth it. And I think with that, plugging Red Ice, we should call it a day.
All right, sounds good. Let's peel out of this Chick-Fil-A. Let's blast some 70s rock as we do it, too.
Absolutely.